you very much. I'm delighted to see all of you here. It's a gathering of friends and relatives of David Moon, and it is at the time of the great epidemic. So I salute all of you for having the courage to come out. Whole cities and countries are being closed down, so it's not trivial. And you may find that this is the last big function you're allowed to go to for a while. Thank you for venturing out. Some of you from Howick, Durban, Joburg, even Bella Bella. The book, it's really all about the book, David's book. It's Blue Hills, and it refers, the title may be a bit obscure to you, but it refers to Table Mountain, which is very often masked with a blue haze, and it can be seen from the family farm, which was a farm hotel at Mandeston, and that looked down the valley onto Table Mountain. Table Mountain is an extraordinary position because you can see it right from up here at Hilton, right across down to Cato Ridge. It's about a 270-degree view down onto it. And from David's family's farm, you look directly down onto Table Mountain and the Blue Hills. And Blue Hills played a big role in the family life. It was partly a family triumph of the first generation that arrived from Cornwall with absolutely nothing and made it, really made it as a farmer. And the next generation who lost the family farm and entered poverty and worked for the next 2 generations. And then the subsequent generations and how they made it from that really sad state. The Great Depression had a role to play, but it was this sense of this lost paradise. The book was also a vehicle for David to realize and articulate his unique contributions to his extended family and many, many friends, both as a gay person, an artist, a teacher, a lover of plants, a landscaper, a cabbage breeder, 10 years of cabbage breeding. He was a shaman. He was a natural shaman. He talked to the spirits, and people recognized that in him. And other spirit people always found David, and they just connected. And I would sit there, and they would have this cosmic communication, and I would be in awe. He was an archivist of notes, with a bit of help from Krina, and the archives became a den of great joy, discovering stories and history. He was a collector of tales and a writer. Some of his art is here for you to see. There's in that gallery over there, there's 2 of his quilts and bronze. And then in this side, there's various paintings and some paper mache work, but also the book covers. David worked for 20 years with Mobs Mobley doing book covers for Natal University Press. And then also some of his ceramics. A pivotal figure in David's life was Maggie Hamlin, who was perhaps the most famous artist in the UK today. She's famous and infamous. She had a TV show, and she was famously caustic and challenging. She's famously lesbian and did not have men on her painting courses, but David managed to wangle his way onto her landscaping course. And 2 of the pivotal paintings are over there, Wimbledon Common, when she eventually let him onto the course. And then there's one of Highgate Cemetery. And when she had a look at that, she said, "Moon, you've been conning me. That's smashing." We got in touch with her in 2006 when we were in England, and her agent was very surprised when she agreed to chat to us, and we still had a number. So what's up to her about this opening today? And she had a communication with me She said, "Good luck to hear the good news about David's show in the book. I have fond memories of him. I wish him very good luck and send him a big hug." This is from this frightening person. And then when she discovered that David had died, she then said, "Well, I send you my warmest feelings. My memories of David remain strong and special. Maggie." Well, that's very special, and those of you who are artists will know it's like writing to Bruce Springsteen and having him answer it was. The book is also a story about the love that David and I had for 41 years, just over half of David's eventful life, my life. In this time of global crises, the coronavirus, climate change, the rebirth of fascism, all impacting on our lives, it's easy to forget enduring love and the impact it has, giving our lives direction and meaning. The story about the book, David finished the book. He actually finished it to the point where he was satisfied that it could go to the publisher. And Sheila took it off to Rod McLeod, the publisher, and it was with the publishers when David first got sick. And we chased Rod to bring us some pages. And he brought us 4 pages, the first 4 pages printed out of the book. And I was able to read them to David 4 days before he died. So he did know that his book was with the publisher and was going to make it. So the editorial team just looked after it from there on. We just saw it through to completion and unveiling today. A key person in the editorial team was Krina Alcock. For those of you who may not know Krina, she is a journalist, a writer, a botanist, an environmentalist, the runner of a craft enterprise of magnitude for many, many years, and has worked in the development field for most of her life. She and David dated briefly when David was 21 years old, and they remained close friends for the next 60 years. I'd like to ask Krina to address us on the evolution of Blue Hills, the book, because she was pivotal to this book.
I didn't know there were going to be so many people. I'm not a speaker, and I should have made proper notes. And I thought, gosh, I know this book so well, I can talk about notes. Until I saw these photographs, I actually thought I had missed Dave since he died. Because he was so much part of my life that he's still part of my everyday. The birds, especially the last years when he was so ill, and I was butterflies in my garden. I've just seen the hoop. The aloes are coming to flower. Want me to talk louder?
No, yes.
Can you? What do I do?
Just talk into.
And can you hear? And so I still observe the things and talk today, as I have done for all these years. But seeing the photographs of him now, that I was missing terribly, and always will. I met Dave when I was 19, and we went out, I said for 3 months, he said for 6 months or a year. My son likes to say, Dave went out with me, returned and gave the rest of his life. Dave, we went out and Dave then became my best friend. And I realized that Dave became everybody's best friend because he was so special. He was only capable of deep friendships. And all of you here, I'm sure, would have called him a best friend too, because Dave was just so incredibly special. And I was thinking about the interval between his death almost a year ago and this event today. And I realized that in African terms, this is the equivalent of an umsebenzi, or a return of the spirit, in Ukubuyisa, where after a certain period of mourning, you come together and you bring the spirit back. And I'm sure Dave is here with us today, and he's really glad that he's not here in person, because he hated attention. And when, on occasion, his garden was open to the public, he developed terrible migraines and lay down all day, incapable of meeting anybody. And I'm sure that's what would have happened today. He would have disappeared. It meant too much, and he had to get away from us. The making of the book, Dave never intended it to be a book when he started. I went rummaging through his files. I should explain that Dave and Mark's home has been mine in a very special way over the years. After my husband died, before he died, we used their home as our home in town. And I had a period in the 1980s when I was ordered to spend a week a month in town at the archives, and Dave and Mark were my home. And every night I would rush in with the latest exciting discoveries. And so when Dave got interested in doing his family history, he asked me to introduce him to the archives, which was one of my favorite places. And it took him 5 minutes to start discovering exactly how to work the family history papers, which had never been what had interested me. And Mark and I were trying to work out, okay, when did Dave? He didn't intend the book. And rummaging about all my old papers, I found a document dated the 16th of August 1989, and it's called A Genealogical Study by David John Moon. And he starts the genealogical study with a quote from Oscar Wilde. I can't help detesting my relations. I suppose it comes from the fact that none of us can stand other people having the same faults as ourselves. And there's another quote from Oscar Wilde. Relations are simply a tedious pack of people who haven't the remotest knowledge of how to live, nor the smallest instinct about when to die. And then a more serious quote. It is written that you should take neither pride nor shame from your ancestry, but rather from what you accomplished with the gift of life that has been bestowed upon you. And the last years of Dave's life, the gift of life was a very heavy gift to carry forward. Now, I've mentioned this first, 1989 was a long time ago, and the next paper that I found was 1999. So there were 10 years between what he started and his next bit of writing. Now, this first bit, he got very involved in all the rules around genealogical procedure, because he actually says it has not been referenced properly, nor has a standard genealogical procedure been followed. However, I hope to end up with an accurate and useful document. I was never interested in family histories, and I'm not sure I am even now, not in that sort of form. And I'm going to read you his opening lines about his great-grandfather, because when you read the book, you'll see the transition that happened between starting the study and beginning to write. It reads, John Moon, born 25th of August 1858, died 11th of January 1933. Aged 74 years and 5 months. I think that the reason it started to become a book, and I'm sorry to admit this, I'm not a technological person. I stuck to my typewriter until you couldn't buy ribbons anymore. Dave was a little bit better than me, but only just. When he had a computer and the internet, he found he could send the same letter or the same bit of writing to all his friends. Mark thinks it started when they went to Rome in 1998, and he could write, he was lit up with the experience of being in Rome, and he could send the same letter to everybody at the same time. And what happened in 1999, he decided to start visiting, he went to visit Blue Hills, and he wrote an account of his visit to Blue Hills. And then he called it the place of the Amagnosi, the place of the family spirits. And he did several visits. And these went out to friends around the world, and they all wrote back and said, Dave, you've got to do a book. That is so wonderful. And that was when Dave started thinking that maybe the family history could be combined as a book. And that immediately produced all kinds of difficulties. It's very easy, I think, to do a genealogical study because it can be impersonal. And Dave hated having to reveal or expose himself. And some of the best things Dave has ever written are hidden in the files at home that never made the pages of the book. His correspondence between his godson Jeremy in England is absolutely wonderful. I'd love to have seen it in the book, but it was completely unguarded and probably marvelous. So those sort of things belong for a later period. When Dave did start trying to enlarge the Blue Hills section into a book, I counted up the words for him and I said, Dave, it'll run to 16 pages, that's not a book. So Dave had bits of his family that he liked, bits of his family that he disliked, and he really disliked his great-grandfather. And so he starts expanding the book, and he tries to be as dismissive as possible of his great-grandfather. And he wrote this. During the 1920s, John Moon decided to sell his farms at Manchester and retire to Durban. The two farm names I remember are Thorn and Tree. His wife accidentally drowned in the sea at Durban during the last week of March. They were living in Vorst Road. When you read the book, you'll see what happened to those two stories. He said, Dave, I'm very sorry, you can't possibly dismiss Grandad like that. You've got to tell us something about him. So Dave and I had always had I went into journalism without going to university, and Dave went to university while he was working in the roads department. And when he started doing English at university, he passed all his set works on to me. So in due course, I read everything, including Dear Heaven Candide, out of loyalty to Dave. And at different points in our friendship, we would have splurges. When Lawrence of Arabia came out, we went and watched it together, and then read every book we could find on Lawrence. Dave discovered D.H. Lawrence at university, and then I read all the D.H. Lawrence books. And I was rereading the Alexandrian Quartets, and found some writing that was absolutely wonderful, and said, Dave, reread this. And the next time I saw him, he was totally defeated. He said, I'm never going to, I don't want to do this book, I'm incapable of writing it, I can't write. And he then, in total defeat, wrote what you'll see is the opening paragraph about his great-grandfather, and it was written in a moment of total despair when she was giving up on the book. And he said, do I really want to be created by my great-grandfather, John Moon? I've always seen him as a sort of messiah, caught in a force too powerful to be human, as if genetic materials conspired to concentrate in one individual, the end product of their long genetic race to escape serfdom and poverty. I'm going to cut it short, but he then said, like a possessive white charmer, he destroyed all male children by casting them into self-doubt and impotence, so that no one would ever rival him. And I must say, I never believed in the book until Dave wrote about white charmer, and then for the first time I said, Dave, I think you've got a book. It was like a signpost that helped direct where to go. Dave was a very reluctant writer when it came to anything about himself. And Sheila, who eventually made it into a book, she sent us a big pile of New Yorker magazines which you couldn't bear to throw away because they were a bit out of date. And in them I found a marvelous essay by Salman Rushdie called Disappeared. And it was on his getting the fatwa. And he wrote it entirely in the third person, as he, listeners. And I said, Dave, if you wrote in the third person, you could write anything Dave longed to. Now, John is going to talk to you about family histories, and I was very interested in the way that John used himself. It is very difficult to write about himself. And if Dave had, that's why there's so many things that are not said in the book, and that we had to actually chivvy him, and a lot we found in his letters. His letters are wonderful. I have to warn you all that Dave is a born archivist, and for a period when they were living in Clayton Avenue, which was when he started on the family history, their guest room used to be a shared study, and Dave and Mark, it's a great test of the relationship. It's a very tiny study, and they had different methods, and they put a guest bed in there as well. And Dave had what I called a deep letter filing system, which was just seemed to be paper spread all over the place. In fact, they all ended up in these files. And when we were trying to get material for the book, we said, Dave, you've left that out, you've left that out. We go through the files, and I want to warn you, if you've ever been indiscreet in letters to Dave, those indiscretions are filed away, and it's best to retrieve them while you can. And I found a few of my own confidences, and then you meant to leave them there, but it's very tempting. And so the sort of thing, every now and again, Dave would be quite happy to write, and here was a letter I wrote to him after the chapter is in the book. And I said, he'd email my son, and he'd send an email to the farm when he lived. Dearest Dave, at last a way to make you write. Throw a dead body in the garden. How many do you need to keep going? You'll see that he had all sorts of extraordinary experiences in his garden, and those are things he wrote very well. The two parts of the book where he just wrote without hesitation was his wonderful account of meeting Maggie Hadley and doing the course with her, and the other one is his trip to Cornwall, where he at last went back to his family. In the course of, if it started in 1999, he then had 10 years of illness and Parkinson's, which made things increasingly difficult. And I'd like to pay tribute to Andrea here, who got all sorts of scribbles and paste and cut jobs and put them all into typed files so that there was something that we could look at and say, gosh, that's nearly a book. And then when Sheila came, it started to look as if it might be a book. It really, I've only just seen it this morning, and I think Dave must be thrilled. And just to end off, while I was looking through, because most of this is quite serious, but looking through Dave's files, I said that Dave was part of my reading education, and we had a splurge of Carlos Castaneda as well. And Dave put me off Julius Caesar forever. And the reason I mentioned that today is the Ides of March. And the reason I know it's the Ides of March is because of David. And David sent me this from, he was a comedian who, it's headed, Wash the Blood Off My Toga. And it was a comedian who pretended to be a private eye investigating famous murders. And wait a minute, who's the dame? That's Calpurnia, Caesar's wife. Yeah, well, she's a suspect too. Wait a minute. Pardon me, Mr. Caesar. Yes? Flavius Maximus here, private Roman eye. I'd like to ask you a few questions. What do you know about this? I told him, Julie, don't go, Julie. I said, don't go, it's the Ides of March. Now look, Mrs. Caesar, if I told him once, I told him 1,000 times, Julie, don't go. Well, that's wrecked Julius Caesar. And among the many things I have to thank Dave for is the laughter. I don't think it comes across enough in the book. But my gosh, the laughter we shared in all these years made life very well worth living in very dark times. I'm thrilled to see the book out, and I'm sure Dave is thrilled to see the book out too.
Queen has managed to steal all my notes. I'd like to ask John Cunningham to address us. John, as you all know, was an editor at The Witness for many years, but he's also a book writer, in particular a biographer and autobiographer. John.
I don't think this is helping a lot, is it? No. Right, so I'm going to try and raise my voice. And, can you hear me at the back? Brian, can you? Well, hello, everyone. As I'm one of several speakers, I promise not to go on too long. Why, I have asked myself, did Mark request me to speak on this occasion? And I reached the conclusion that there are two reasons. It's about 40 years since through Heather I met Mark and David. I don't remember the specific occasion, but I do remember very jolly picnics at the Gold Cup at Greyville many years ago, when perhaps the most important participant was a Dutch green gin called Clarrain, which doesn't exist anymore. Mark tells me that its days were numbered even back then, and it was heavily discounted, and that's why we had so much of it. The other reason is probably because I've also written a family memoir, as Katrina has mentioned. Mine was published in 2017 and is predominantly, although it's refracted through my consciousness, about my parents' and grandparents' generations, whereas David's is more intimate. He and his thoughts are at the center of it. However, the books do have a strong similarity in that both of them have the names of farms as titles. In my case, it's Hazara, an odd-sounding name that reflects my family's association with the British Indian Army Regiment. David's Blue Hills is the evocative name of a farm in the Mandeston area, between Umlaas Road and Thornhill, not far from here, which the Moon family once owned, as you've been told, and which David has elegized as a Shangri-La. But some of you may be asking yourselves, why did David and I think that our families warranted a memoir? It's a good question, and one that worried me for the many years that I worked on my book. And I'm sure it concerned David too while he was writing his. By way of an answer, let me give you two quotations. One is from Boyhood, J.M. Coetzee's first volume of thinly veiled autobiography, and it goes like this. He alone is left to do the thinking. How will he keep them all in his head? All the books, all the people, all the stories. And if he does not remember them, who will? Nobel Prize-winning author Coetzee, a South African now living in Australia, is saying that his thoughts are filled with memories which he feels are worth something. But that if he doesn't do something about them, they'll be lost forever. In other words, he's taken responsibility for his family's story, which David has done. The other quote is from an essay by British writer Virginia Woolf. The essay is entitled The Art of Biography, and it goes like this. The question now inevitably asks itself whether the lives of great men only should be recorded. Is not anyone who has lived a life and left a record of that life worthy of biography? The failures as well as the successes, the humble as well as the illustrious. And what is greatness? And what is smallness? What Woolf is saying is that one doesn't have to be illustrious to be the subject of a biography or memoir. Given the humanness that binds us all, so-called ordinary lives are often more interesting than the lives of so-called celebrities. You don't have to be a Kardashian, for example. A great example of this is a book about India written by Nirav Chowdhury called The Autobiography of an Unknown Indian, whose title says it all. It is considered a masterpiece by many eminent writers and historians. So consciously or unconsciously, David has taken his cue from Coetzee and Woolf and written the story of himself and his family. Blue Hills is a lovely book, well written, well edited, and well designed. For all of us who are so fond of David, it is a memento of him and his world. What makes it more remarkable is that many of the tracks that he had to follow were not clearly marked and required diligence and doggedness. The book gives us David wearing a number of hats, not only as a beloved partner, family member, and friend, but as a genealogist, artist, teacher, horticulturist, archivist, as I just heard, and as a gay person who in his earlier years particularly had to endure prejudice and bigotry. In the book too are the same triumphs and tragedies that beset all families. Stories everywhere which make them so compelling. And David's social tapestry is familiar to us because, broadly speaking, it is our own. Such stories are not told often enough. I'm going to now talk very briefly about the writing of family stories and to encourage you all, if you haven't started doing so already, to start putting together your own stories. The important thing is for everyone to become a custodian of memory. Every family needs a custodian of memory, and if you're not inclined to be that person, you must find the person who it must be and help them tell your family story. Family stories are hugely important. They're not only important for a family or for friends, but they're social history. There was a case in my book when the historian Jeff Guy read it. He said to me he didn't know that so many retired Indian Army officers came and bought sugar farms. Now here's a historian who knew Natal backwards, but he didn't know that. I didn't know it was significant. I put it in my book, and it alerted someone infinitely more informed than I am of something he didn't know. The first thing you need to do is accumulate the facts. This painstaking process involves primarily questioning relatives while they're still around, and rooting around for reports, photographs. Photographs, please write captions if you know who's in the photograph, because as I remember from my witness days, we had boxes of photographs.
And a date.
And?
A date.
And a date. And we didn't have the names of the people in them. And incidentally, something I didn't think to include in my talk, which comes to mind now, David offered, with his immense knowledge of Maritzburg, to come along and sit in the archive and write down the name of the building or the name of people whom he could recognize in the photographs, so that we would at least increase the value of our archive. Unfortunately, Parkinson's arrived at about that point, and it never really happened. Once you've rooted around and typed keywords into the computer to see what comes up and gone to the archives in Maritzburg and even the Bessie Head Library, there's some very good newspapers, bound copies down there under the library, and I'm deviating very slightly here, but a very interesting exercise is to go and get the newspaper that appeared the day after you were born in the place that you were born. It'll give you an idea of the world into which you arrived. And I can tell you, going through papers in the 1920s to look up an obituary that I had as a cutout that didn't have the date, I found two things preoccupied colonial Natal, or then the Union Natal, the people, the readers of the paper, the snakes and security. Things don't change So once you've done that, you start putting together a rudimentary family tree and get people to feed into that as well. And the crucial thing is to write it down, and if you don't have people to whom you can bequeath it or who show any interest, to pinpoint someone who is interested and then make sure it gets to them. If writing is too daunting for you or you don't have the time, then get someone else, as I say, to do it. At each stage, as each stage feeds into the next, so your unique family lineage will become apparent. It's amazing. It reminds me of those old days when you used to develop photographs. You would put something under a sort of camera and you'd go into a dark room and you'd put a piece of paper into a pool of some chemical, and then slowly a photo would emerge out of the whiteness. And that's what happens if you do enough digging. Slowly you'll get something to come out of it. After all, if nothing else, all of us are products of history. Many of us had ancestors who were born across the globe on an imperial time that has since receded. Our families took root in this previously alien land, which has now become our home. How interesting it would be to know what drove each person to make the decisions they did, choices which have had such an impact on our lives. But don't delay. Without facts, no true story is possible. So speak to your relatives and your friends, and anyone, your siblings, and anyone else who can throw light on your family, even if obliquely. Don't waste a moment, because sometimes people die suddenly and unexpectedly, taking great chapters of information with them, which are then lost forever. Luckily for us, David was very aware of it. Thank you.
Thank you, John. The next address is by Virginia McKenny, and you'll notice she isn't here. Virginia has a cold, but happily she had it before coronavirus arrived in South Africa, but she declined to come to Maritzburg, and so she sent me her address. Virginia studied fine arts with David in the same class, so they were in the class of 1977, and they had a fascinating bond, a friendship, and a rivalry in that fine arts class. And it was an extraordinary class, and exceptional artists came out of it. There was something strange happened in a 4 or 5 year flowering of that department. They had a professor who totally neglected the department, and in his sort of, it wasn't even benign neglect, it was absentee neglect. That department flourished, and an extraordinary number of leading artists in South Africa today came out of that class. She's currently the professor of painting at Michaelis School of Fine Arts at UCT. David starts Blue Hills by first introducing Mark, the outsider, to the family, soon to become central in his life. This surprising move, in a sense, is a creative one that deviates from the norm of more standard family chronologies and histories. Mark, a man of science, he describes as from the whitened landscape of certainty, and he deposits this is quite literally the polar opposite to himself, picturing himself as a being who was sheltered in an enchanted garden. The book, filled with stories of people and places, is also a palette, one that seems to have grown out of this charmed garden. Its chapter headings are filled with colour: blue hills, vibrant red, pale blue forget-me-nots, brilliant orange, verdant green, russet brown, beige val landscape, blue blotched pansies, pink and scarlet river lilies. Within this, there's a painting, or several, of agitated complementarities. Maggie Hamlin, the feisty British painter with whom David trained in London before he came to do his degree at the Fine Arts School of the then University of Natal, would probably be proud. David dedicates a chapter of the book to describe the test of fire he had to go through to join her group, and having proven himself, she remained a friend until the end. In his self-deprecating way of telling how he fumbled and fudged his way through with a bit of help from a sympathetic member of the group. But the image included in the book records his work at the time, and that belies his telling. A more than competent painting of swords and trees conjures something beyond the physical object presented in the landscape there. It also evokes a quality of day unusual in any beginner painter's vocabulary. Herein lies sun and breeze, scudding clouds, and one suspects at the periphery of our senses the possibility of birdsong. And that's the landscape of Wimbledon Common, which is through there, and it's sitting above the painting of Highgate Cemetery, both done in Maggie's landscaping course. So have a look. David's love of the natural world and his love of painting and art making, in a sense, are part of the same panorama. His was not an art that rested only on the conventional support of canvas, but one that extended to almost every facet of his life, to his house and the things in it, to his conversations and letters, often decorated with images. And it is hardly a surprise that so many of his works that populate his and David's and Mark's home are landscape or depict gardens. I suspect a green sap ran through his veins. He certainly had green thumbs, and his gardens were a place of invention and wonder, always fecund, and always to be introduced to the visitor as a preamble to any visit before the taking of tea. Here was creativity that took on a living form. Here was a conversation with the world that contributed to its beauty on a canvas larger than any studio could hold. In a sense, this has always been David's way, to look at the whole of life obliquely, differently, to see creative possibilities, always a little bit fey and never-endingly inventive and creative. He recognized art's contribution to the sense of self. I would find realization in art and creativity, he says in the chapter that chronicles his early exploration of his sexual identity, giving his heart to both men and women. The painting of Cora Hoekster, created during the latter years of the 1970s, when he was fascinated with the vibrant colors of Alan Jones and pop artists, came out as electric in their color contrast, as she is vital in real life. Produced during the latter years, I shared a studio with him at university. This was the period that encouraged David to play and experiment in diverse ways. I was privy to the development of many of his earlier works, which still reside in this house. I remember the life drawing sessions where David's worldly experience surpassed our own by so many years. The reclining nude with the gorgeous rump here, evocative of the Rokeby Venus, so different to the painting of Cora, was produced with countless veils of sensual colour. Large nude on that side there. Only David's mum worked out that it was me. He drew, he inked, he painted, he scratched. He worked with paper mache, he coiled string, he collaged. He put things together, he took them apart, he turned them around. I suspect we were all a little in love with David at the time. He seemed prodigious in his output and knowledge. I know I came to draw daily sustenance from our conversations, where his view of the world was one with porous boundaries, where things could meld into one another, where magic of many kinds might make their appearance, and art was often the glue that held it together. In 1981, after he graduated, David took his degree and his passion for teaching out to one of the most rewarding and demanding of arenas. He got a job at Indaleni Teachers Training College, teaching a specialist art course with Lorna Pearson. And ironically, Lorna's painting is the one immediately behind the nude. And Lorna taught with David for about 14 years. He clearly loved it. It invigorated him. The college produced real artists. Later, when the college was dismantled, he and Lorna went to work at Indonesia College of Education, where art was demoted, as it is so often, to a secondary position in a larger curriculum. The difficulties of larger classes, less room to do the work, less time to do it, were exacerbated by the violence of those years. In the section of the book that narrates this period, violence is searingly described. I'd forgotten how raw that time was. What I remember visiting David at Indonesia was how proud he was of his students' work, how committed he was to it. He showed me pieces telling me about the projects and narrating the story behind the endeavours. Work ranged in quality, but what didn't waver was David's persistent love for the students and what they were trying to achieve. That David had a special place in the heart of his students is more than clear. That the job and the violence of the times took their toll is equally clear. I had forgotten how intense those days were, how vulnerable and fragile we all were, and how David, in the thick of it, was, despite his grief at all that he describes in the book, was clearly a beacon, a place of sanctuary for many. This he remained throughout his life. He was a healer of sorts, an insightful and emotional pillar for those around him. His creativity was always central to that, embedded in his life and his friendships. Many of those which he maintained from his fine art varsity days, such as Heather Cunningham, whose portrait of David graces the start of the book, and Faye Halstead, whose Ardmore ceramics business is now a global phenomenon. Importantly, though, it was never the art world that David pursued. It was life itself that he was interested in. Always making, always creating. Mark chronicles that David had to be creative. It's a need, a compulsion. He has to be making things, writing, painting, quilting, cooking, gardening, sewing, knitting, teaching. If we look at Mark's vocabulary of David's creative activities, it's clear that at the heart of David's endeavor was his drive to be a homemaker, to create a place of rich warmth and welcome. There is no hierarchy of distinction between studio and daily life, between interior and exterior, between painting and domestic activity, between the objects in the house and the heart of what matters. It all does. Look at the ink drawings of the interiors in this house, the tenderness by which place and object are rendered, how the pattern on something is as important as the object next to it, or the way light falls, or how a person situates themselves in this. David's art was an art in life, embedded deep within his experience of it, something that he willingly and openly shared through everything he did, enriching the lives of those around him with his generosity. At the beginning of the book, David narrates the story of the Amadlozi plants, plants that belong to the spirits of the ancestors, who are with us in the garden amongst the bloom. David remains here too, in the plants, in the art, in the objects, in life. In his gift, we have not lost him now, but find him present everywhere here. Just talking about the Amadlozi plants, this is a garden at home, and it had a spread of the amaryllis that David and I bred for 30 years. And at one point we had about 50,000 of them. And the mole rats have done their best to eat them at Woodgrove. But David's cousin, Penny Lottering, couldn't come today. But she WhatsApped me and she sent me a photograph of her hippeastrum. Now, hippeastrums come out in spring. They don't come out in autumn. So we both decided that definitely it was David kicking the plant and saying, come on, fly.
Mark, you keep saying David on the uniform. Won't you tell me? David had a lot of unrecognized skills, and I love this one. He was a crack shot. And Mark was endlessly envious. He could never hit a target as well as Dave. And in Army, Dave actually won the trophy as the best shot in crack. Someone who was totally disinterested in firearms. And it was a matter of rivalry between them.
David had a lot of heavy talents.
It's just seeing him in the Army uniform.
He was also, in the Army, he was in the 25 pounders. And the bizarre part was that my dad was in the Rhodesian 25 pounders and was in Italy and Egypt. And when, after 28 years, my mother agreed to meet David, she took to him like, you know, everyone, when they met David, finally realized, gee, what a nice person. And my mother, being this very unfiltered person that she is, she looked at him and said, David, you're very nice. You're much more interesting than Mark. And the wonderful thing was that he sat with my dad and they spent a whole afternoon talking just about 25 pounders and firing these cannons. I need to thank many people who have made this book possible. Krina for so many aspects, for being a true friend, for laughter and tears, for making the book possible by making David believe that it was possible, that he had a writer's voice, and for editing the entire book several times. Most of all, for pushing Sheila and me at the end to get the damn book finished. And for speaking today, knowing that she doesn't like public speaking. Rory for always being there. Rory is the quiet one who gets things done and does videos and has recorded a lot of things for us. Thank you, Rory. Richard, Lisa, and Daisy for inspiring David, especially Daisy and her art in the latter years. Because Daisy at 4 and 5 and 6 was shared art with David. And right at the end, Daisy drew a very nice painting and then gave it to her mum and said, "Now photograph it and send it to David." And so Lisa sent it to me. And Daisy said, "No, don't send it to Mark, that's no good. It's useless. Send it to David." To Sheila, you really are a special person. You're editor-in-chief, and you pushed and prodded, and you're a friend, and you made it happen. And you worked with David when it was really hard. And Rod McLeod, the publisher, who went to, did a fine arts degree here at University of Natal. And I think that Rod's sense of art comes out beautifully in this book. And it really made such a difference as the layout artist. And I think the printers did a lovely job as well. And Maritzburg printers as well. Andrea, thank you. Andrea was David's assistant and secretary and chauffeur and helped during the days when I was at work. And she helped David through the final evolution of the book. And in those times, there were many days that were very hard. And thank you, Andrea. To Bryony and Krobi for suggesting that we could have a book launch here. And then Bryony and her team for making it all happen. This is a wonderful venue, absolutely beautiful venue. We loved it, and one of the late photographs was taken by a professional photographer walking around here with a friend from England, and David in the wheelchair, just the two of us in this glorious space with a wonderful light. You'll see it's one of the most beautiful paintings, photographs at the end. Heather Cunningham helped me with choosing the artworks and then helped me with the layout, and has been there all these years, going back to 1977 as a friend of David's and an artistic friend, and we really needed her aesthetic sense to get it right. So thank you very much. Over the many years, many artists have encouraged David to pursue his artistic dreams, and I especially thank Isabella Quattrocchi and Annette McMaster, who worked with David literally for several years. And who is that? Someone's music. You're ready for the soundtrack of the video. But you can't take a move anywhere. That's what I say. Yeah, Annette and David had a wonderful pact, and Annette was a master quilter, and David was a wonderful artist. And their pact was to meet together and share artistic sensibilities, so that David could become a master quilter, and Annette could become a portraitist. And she did indeed become a master portraitist, but using quilting as the technique. And if you have a look through there, you can see two of David's quilts, which are quite extraordinary, and we would not have achieved that without Annette. So thank you. Finally, a big thank you to David Mooney, our dear friend, for being a remarkable human being. His extraordinary courage and determination made this possible. He wrote until he could no longer write. Then he dictated notes. He painted until he could not hold a brush. Then he took scissors and made cutouts with coloured paper. Or he planted pots up with speculum and other plants. He never gave up, despite the terrible loss of his faculties, slowly, remorselessly, as Parkinson's took everything. And the book is a testament to his life. A rich life, enriched by the need to create, to make art, to write, to be an artist. He had a remarkable capacity to engage with and empathize with other people. He made friends for life, and today's gathering reflects that rare talent. Thank you for being here and rejoicing in David's life, an artist's life. Brian is sitting in the back with copies of the book. I do hope you will buy a book, which I can say is maybe well under half price. Thank you.